You believe in ghosts? If so, then boy, do I have a real ghost story for you. Being so involved with the paranormal from an early age on, you tend to open yourself up to experiences that you've never previously had before. I'm of the belief that if you commit to actively hunting spirits, they will start to manifest and make themselves known to you. However, if you close yourself off to this realm, the chances of finding yourself in a paranormal situation are slim. A lack of commitment will result in most spirits ignoring you. Just think about it for a second. If you have absolutely no desire to see paranormal activity, why would a ghost waste their time trying to communicate with you? It would be just like talking to a wall. Just like the saying goes, seeing is believing, or in this case, investing is believing. This story I'm about to share with you, though just a story, is undeniable proof that ghosts are living among us in the human world. These experiences occurred late in September of 2005, and at the time, I was 15. My mother tragically perished in a car accident the year previously, and that left my dad to care for me alone. It was an absolutely miserable existence from then on, as this was the love of his life. My dad ended up being so depressed that I would often find him crying alone in his room at my house every single day for the next month and a half. I personally have never seen my dad suffer so much, and although I was also hurting, I was more concerned with my dad's well-being. It was then that I would start praying for Mom to return and give us a sign to at least help comfort my dad and let him know that she was okay. However, all that praying didn't seem to help. All of the nights begging God to send her back down to us for a message almost seemed futile. I remember doing spirit sessions alone to frantically contact my mom, using a Ouija board, a spirit box, anything I could get my hands on to help. I never got any signs, and the house stood silent, as quiet as it's ever been, except for the faint sounds of my dad crying most nights. It made me start to doubt and think that ghosts and God were imaginary. I lost my faith in nearly everything. I remember angrily saying to myself that God and ghosts don't exist. My dad is hurting so much. I wanted to connect with the afterlife so bad, and yet nothing is coming through. Show me something. I remember saying that in utter and complete frustration. Still nothing. But all that was soon about to change. I remember one late night, I could once again hear my dad sobbing in his room after a hard day's work. He came back later that day, around 10 p.m. He was lying on the bed, and to comfort my dad, I went to sleep with him in his room. We had a bed across from my dad's that I would sleep in. I reassured Dad that everything would be okay, even saying, "Dad, I can't lose you too. Please, you have a daughter to raise. Mom wouldn't let you go on like this." My dad simply smiled and told me that he would never give up on me or his life, so he fell asleep. I tried to fall asleep as well, laying in the bed across from me. This was the moment when I was finally going to see a sign that I had been desperately seeking, although this was not the sign I was looking for. An hour or so passes. I was drifting off to sleep when I saw a shadow outlined in the form of a person. This wasn't a good shadow because I felt a very negative energy. There were no features except the shadow person looming over my grieving father. I then got up, turned on the light, and that shadow was gone. I went to wake my dad, and he wasn't waking up. I screamed so hard for Dad to wake up, but nothing. I went and called the ambulance immediately. They rushed him to the hospital. This nightmare just couldn't get any worse. I had already lost my mother, and I was on the verge of losing my father as well. So I waited, and I waited in the hospital. My aunt and uncle swung by to give me the most gigantic hug I've ever felt in my life. We were all waiting on the word for the status of my dad. As the doctor walks out, he has a very somber and stern look on his face. Your dad suffered a heart attack in his sleep. We are doing everything in our power to make sure he recovers from this. What they didn't tell us in the moment was that he was fighting for his life and receiving life-saving emergency surgery. It turned out that he also died on the operating table, but came back. After hours of surgery, thankfully, my dad recovered and eventually woke up. The crazy part is, years after this incident, he finally told me that he experienced an out-of-body experience and said that he felt like he went to heaven. He remembers being able to see the doctors working on him. Then suddenly, he was in a sunny field with roses and daisies, all these beautiful flowers surrounding him. He then saw my mom in a blue dress, just smiling at him from a close distance. My dad saw his grandfather, who he had been really close with as a kid. He also saw his childhood dog Spike, and he was running around the field. They both waved at him, gesturing him to come forward. He felt nothing but peace as he moved forward. Everything just felt great for a moment. As he approached Mom, he gave her a great big hug, and my grandpa as well. He said he didn't feel like leaving this place at all, but he knew he couldn't stay. Grandpa said with a great big grin on his face, "We will see you later." Then suddenly, he woke up back in his body in intense pain. That same night my dad was having that episode, my uncle took me back to his house. As I waited for my dad to recover, I had a dream. I dreamt of the Grim Reaper, and he was literally trying to drag my dad up into this dark room with red wallpaper. I remember screaming, "No, I need you, Dad," and trying to physically pull my dad away from the Reaper so he wouldn't take him through the door of the strange room. Eventually, the Reaper gave up and disappeared. My uncle rushed in to hug me, and I told him I had a nightmare. Years later, when my dad told me about what happened to him, I told him my nightmare as well. My theory is that the whole incident, the Black Shadow, the heart attack, the out-of-body experience, and my nightmare, they were all connected. Something dark and sinister was trying to take my dad away from me, and I feel like my dad's grandpa and my mom were somehow stopping this from happening. My uncle believed that my dad was just so worn out and hurt by the loss of my mother that it caused him to have a heart attack because of a broken heart. He does admit, though, that what my dad told us in the nightmare were very eerie, too coincidental to be one. The fact that I was praying for a sign, then challenged something from beyond, and then demanded one, made me feel like I really angered some sort of evil entities. I also believe that in those dark moments, good and evil were fighting for my dad to stay alive. My theory is that these dark forces are trying to take him away from me. I also know that because we're surrounded by so much darkness after we lost Mom, these dark spirits were taking advantage of us in the worst possible way, and I think they were feeding off of us. This whole time that I was hoping for a sign, it was there all along, and I should have realized this. Maybe we were consumed by a dark energy that whole time, and we needed a priest to bless this house. Eventually, that's what we ended up doing, and all felt pleasant and better. My dad slowly started feeling like himself, and the rest was history. I know this sounds insane, but I swear that all this happened, and it is 100% true. Thank you for my long story. Update. Fast forward 10 years. To my surprise, I recently found out that my old house, which was built in the early 1900s, was built on old Indian burial ground. I went to a psychic witch who did a reading on me, and we found out some fascinating things. That I could be surrounded and attached by spirit guides, one that represents good benevolence, and the other which is bad. She said that these two clash with one another, and when the bad spirits get through, they have the power to influence the entire mood of life and the events occurring. All this could have played a factor into what happened to my dad. She said this, plus the entities that are living in our home, including that dark forest cloud that I told you about, seem to have a spiritual clash where the good could be fighting evil. Now, I know this sounds wild, and maybe the witch was just making educated guesses, but after what had happened, I truly believe that there was something going on there. She suggested that she come to the house to perform positive rituals with her group of witches as sort of a good omen to ward off the bad spirits, even though we seemed to get rid of them. The psychic also stressed that, because I still have these attachments, it is very possible that these things could continue and come back. She also suggested that the road my mom was driving on when she passed may have been cursed. She told me that just in case, they could go to the area of the accident to perform a positive healing ritual for the road. We also invited a group of witches to visit my dad in our old home, so we could defeat whatever darkness looms in our home. Well, they ended up showing up to our house late at night. 3 of the witches showed up, and me and my dad participated in the seance as well. We also used a Ouija board. First, we gathered around the kitchen table and held hands as the witches channeled for the spirits. They encouraged them to appear. They stated that they didn't mean any harm, and they wanted to figure out who exactly lives in this house. The main witch, Cynthia, who gave me a psychic reading and told me about the clashing spirits, told me that she felt a tightness in her chest as soon as she walked into the kitchen. She did not sense any good vibes from the kitchen at all, even though the entire first floor, living room, felt more comfortable and at ease. She called out, "Who is the spirit that is choking me and making it hard to breathe?" That's when the kitchen cupboard opened by itself and slammed shut so hard that it startled all of us. That gave us the confirmation that there wasn't a positive ghost that resided in the home, or at least one of them. It was only seconds later that I heard a voice say "go away" in a very low and guttural tone. It was more of a whisper, but it immediately sent shivers down my spine. I turned to the psychic, who was sitting right next to me, and I asked her if she heard that. She said no, but that she could feel the presence of a dark shadow standing between us both. Cynthia then told us that she was getting messages in her mind that the spirit was named Tim, and that he used to be a very angry man, about middle-aged. What we were able to confirm next was crazy. We used a Ouija board and asked about Tim, and the Ouija board both confirmed that it was exactly him. Cynthia was right. She then said that Tim was a very lonely man after his entire family died in a house fire. We later found out that the house we lived in had been rebuilt shortly after. We asked the Ouija board to confirm, and to our surprise, the Ouija board spelled out yes. We then asked about Mom, if she was still okay, and if she passed on. We never actually got any answers from the Ouija board, nor did Cynthia. However, a few days after the whole incident, and I'm not sure if this was just a coincidence or not, but I ended up getting a random text from some unknown number. The text literally showed up with a YouTube link to the song "Found Out About You," a song by Gin Blossoms. That was my mom's favorite song. The song is also about grieving for the loss of a loved one, so it really seemed to be a direct message that tied into me and my family, and what we experience. Anyway, incredibly lengthy story, but I couldn't leave any details out. Thank you so much for reading. Today, me and my dad are doing great. Stay safe, everyone. This is my first, not my last experience. I'm a slight skeptic and a psychology major, so I believe in scientific explanations first and foremost when it comes to aliens and ghosts, before classifying it as a ghost story. I've always been overly curious about my family's lineage and who's related to who in my grandparents' tiny town, founded by my grandfathers and grandfather. I was adopted into the family, and I always felt like a bit of an outcast with no background of my own, so I linked to adapt my family's history, despite our lack of blood relation. One day while my father and I were visiting, he asked my grandmother if she wouldn't mind taking us to the graveyards around the tiny town and showing us around. She took us to the family graveyard, another family's graveyard, who's apparently not related in any way, and finally she took us to a large church in Soldier Shared Graveyard. I was struck by how large this place was and immediately wandered away. It was about 99 degrees that day, with very little wind and high humidity. What happened next could have easily been caused by the heat, but as a half-skeptic, I'm not sure. I decided to tidy up around the headstone, believing it wasn't fair to neglect someone in life or death. As I traveled around emptying out dirty vases, straightening flowers, dusting dirt off headstones, I came across 4 neat little graves in a row. The graves were old, moldy, and worn. Each one had a little weather-worn clipped tulip in front of it, and each one bore the same title, Infant. I don't like to talk about it, but I suffer from an anxiety disorder that causes me to be emotionally numb. It's extremely hard for me to feel empathy or sympathy, but looking at those little graves, I felt my heart break in my chest. I run my fingers over each one and whispered a little prayer for them. I walked away to continue my volunteered grave cleaning duties, and feeling a little strange tug to go back to the little ones' graves and stay there. After a few moments, I stopped under a large tree for a rest, drenched in sweat. Someone had hung a wind chime over another grave. On the same tree, I blankly studied it, listening to my grandmother and father talking across the graveyard. I could see the infant's grave out of the corner of my eye. I reached up to touch the chime when I froze in place. A cold feeling slid down my spine and consumed my stomach. Without thinking, I turned quickly towards the infant's graves and stopped cold. A woman was standing beside the second stone. She had ebony black hair down to her thin waist, and she was wearing the old-fashioned blue dress that looked straight out of the 1900s. But that wasn't the most remarkable thing about her. Her face was smooth, round, and pale, and literally blank. She had no eyes, lips, nose, nothing. I gasped, involuntarily took a step backwards, flinching at the sight. When I recovered, she had vanished without a trace. The last thing I wanted to mention about the cemetery is another night I actually went back to the cemetery on my own, and I noticed something that was really alarming. What I noticed was something so alarming that it literally made my face turn pale. Now, I'm not saying this was a ghost, but I saw a group of people who were in a circle around a gravestone. Even creepier, they all had what looked like brown robes on and hoods on. It was like some sort of cult. That's why I can't immediately just say that it was a ghost or a group of ghosts, because it's pretty obvious that it may have been something else. Maybe it was just some sort of evil ritual that they were performing out there. But I didn't want to last long over there, so I bolted. How's that for a couple of crazy encounters with some spiritual entities or some cult-like figures. Anyway, I really hope you enjoy these pair of stories. They weren't the longest in the world, but I think they were very effective. What do you think? Let me know. It was Halloween time, and I was really excited for what was to come forward. As a person who enjoys Halloween quite a bit, it's something that easily arouses me. I know that sounds funny, but again, that's the way I live my life. Always Halloween. As I got closer to Halloween, I started thinking about ghosts and other things that really amused me, or at least piqued my interest. Then it hit me. You were supposed to subscribe to this channel if you never subscribed, or if you commented, like, and shared the video, because it really helps Phantom's channel grow, and we're so close to 31K. Let's get there by Halloween, and buy some merch while you're at it. I mean, it's in the description below. Did I get you? Bye. Love you guys.